Hey everybody, welcome to this week's Q&As. I had to skip last week's, but more on that later. Let's just jump in and get started. First up, Reagan Kelly said they've recently been getting into building their own blue retro adapters, both internal and external, and it's been a lot of fun, but they're not really able to do more than follow instructions because they don't know how to design circuits. They're also a Vectrix owner, and original controllers for that system are rare and problematic, and most of the community built options are rare and sometimes expensive. They think a blue retro adapter for the Vectrix is a product that needs to exist, and they're willing to roll up their sleeves, but their knowledge isn't there yet. Can I give any advice on resources to read, discords to join, or experts to pester so they can try to make this a thing? So I'm going to guess here. This is an educated guess, but it's still a guess, so please just use this as a jumping off point. I think you're going to need two things. First, you're going to need software knowledge in order to program the firmware in order to work the way that you want. Because Blue Retro is an open source platform, but you still need to edit it to whichever platform that you're applying it to. And then on top of that, you're going to need to design hardware that could plug into the target device that will have the correct voltage on each pin, as well as be able to power the adapter itself, or you could have some USB power for it or something if you wanted to. So it's a combination of learning how to design an adapter, which you could do this on a breadboard from the hardware point of view if you just want to start testing, but you'll need to design an adapter that electrically connects everything with the proper circuits, but then also edit the firmware in order to program it to work correctly. So while this is absolutely doable, I don't think it's something that I would call easy for a beginner to get into, but I've told other people that quite a bit. And the people who don't listen and charge forward usually do great. The 32X version of the 240p test suite was by somebody who had never programmed for the 32X before ever, but they jumped in and got it done, and it came out awesome. So, there's always stuff like that. So, if anybody else here could kind of jump in and give some tips, I think a great place to start was obviously just the Blue Retro GitHub and going through the code there and seeing what's necessary in order to modify it for yourself. But as far as basic circuits go, you could try to use any of the online tools. You could try to get KiCad, which is harder to get started, but it's also free and it's something that you could just use openly. So I would kind of start there and see if there's any YouTube tutorials walking you through how to do a basic design. And just also, one general rule of thumb, the auto route feature is never really something you could rely on unless it's for super basic stuff to just save you some time for doing it yourself. But just like I wouldn't rely on auto settings on a Rigel scope, that's a very precise instrument that you should be learning how to tune. I also wouldn't use auto route for stuff like that. So just some basic tips, I guess. But I think if anybody in the comments wants to chime in, there might be better experts out there that would be willing to help. Next up, Rent Optional has 3 questions, 2 serious and 1 for pure fun. First, they need another foot of cable for their Mayflash F500 Elite right stick. Do USB extension cables add any sort of lag? How long is too long? They believe the existing cable is 8 feet. So if you're just talking about using USB extension cables, they should add 0 latency. Now, they could reach a length in which the signal isn't strong enough to get to the other side, but if you're talking about an 8-foot cable and you get a 3-foot extension cable, 1 or 2 foot, whatever, that's totally fine, and I would not worry about that at all. I would just match protocols. So if it's USB 2, get USB 2. If it's USB 3, get 3, etc. And you might want to do something a little ghetto, like take some non-conductive tape and wrap it around to keep them in place. Because one thing that I have noticed in any extension cable of any kind is they could start to come loose, which could cause issues. So something that you could fix it where, and if you're worried about goop getting on the cables, try to use painter's tape or something. But just a way to lock the 2 cables together in a non-permanent way would also be a pretty good idea. But I don't think you'll have any issue whatsoever. And latency would only be added when the cable length is so long it would be impossible to complete a circuit anyway. So you would never have to worry about that. But great question. Next, with DAC support likely never coming, I'm assuming you mean analog DAC to the analog pocket, and with the Taki Mister being extremely affordable, is there a reason to own an analog pocket dock? There's just a small handful of exclusive pocket games that aren't on Mister, and they've been considering selling their dock. So this has got to be up to you. I mean, it could be that the firmware support is right around the corner. It could be that it's never coming. But the fact that it's software, it means it could happen at any time. And I just, that's a hard one, you know? It's just, is this something that you think you're going to use all the time? Is this something that you're going to just dedicate your pocket for portable use and then get a mister for always being connected to other stuff? That's really a decision you have to make for yourself. But if you wanted to have one device that did everything, I would hold on to the dock and just, keep pinging analog every month or so, asking for an update. Politely pinging, but pinging. And lastly, it looks like they got Doom running on a Nintendo Alarmo. What's the most fun and ridiculous device that I'm aware of that could play Doom? And what's the most ridiculous one I'd like to see it on in the future? I don't know if there's any devices left, to be honest. I've seen so many. There was that commercial, social media ad, whatever you want to call it, a couple of years ago that was promoting Doom, and it was showing it running on the craziest stuff. A refrigerator with a smart screen on it, like anything that you could imagine. And I just thought that was beyond funny. So I think anything out there that could run software, it's just fun to see it run on. But just as a joke, like I would never sit there and play Doom on a 3/4 inch screen. It's probably 4 frames per second or something like that. But it's awesome as a nerd to see stuff like that happen. So I don't know. I would love to have anybody in the chat who feels like chiming in. What do you think is missing that Doom doesn't run on yet that we could see it on? But yeah, I think that'd be pretty funny. Maybe like the screens in Times Square in New York City would be very funny one day if the people who controlled those one morning when there weren't many people in there just started playing Doom on it just for the heck of it. But I don't know. That's about it. Anybody have any thoughts on that? Next up, Adam Ant has 2 issues they'd like some help with, and one's kind of a long shot, but I'll do my best. Let's see what we got. First, they've been on a Sega Saturn kick. They have a Saturn that they did the FRAM mod for, and they installed a mode. The FRAM is the only storage device they have. What would be a good option to add more storage space? Satiator, Saru, is there some kind of RAM cartridge they don't know about? If the Saru's the answer, is there a good source to get one? So for me personally, I would pick the Saru based on current and upcoming features. And there's another one that was supposed to have been out 2 months ago they approached the build of this so it could be made with all brand new parts. So you don't have to worry about getting one that has repurposed chips that could die at any moment. I have to follow up again about that. I don't know what the delay was, but I would personally wait to see how that one performed and then make your decision. Do you get that one? Do you just get the cheapest one on AliExpress and kind of go from there? You could just use an action replay cart, or you could even flash the action replay cart with the custom software on there. So pseudo Saturn Psi. That's all really up to you, but it's just one of those things where the Saru has so much potential that I would lean towards that, not even for today, but for things going forward in the future. And you never know, you might end up using a combination of that and the mode to run your software at some point, because the things that run on the Saru will load a heck of a lot faster, but it doesn't have the same compatibility that the mode does. So you kind of have the best of both worlds there. The long shot question. They have a Sega CD with a broken leaf switch on the CD tray. This limit switch was made by Sony and has been discontinued. They found a couple of sketchy sources that claim to have stock and all have canceled their orders. So they don't have stock, right? This limit switch is similar to the lid switch on the Saturn VA2 and also models for the CD lid. Have I ever run into this to find alternatives or even built my own? I vaguely remember somebody saying that there are different models of Sony CD players that have the same type of parts in it, which would make sense because I think there was most of the stuff in there was Sony, so that would totally make sense. But that could have also been talking about the CDX. There could have been. I mean, this is going from memory, and we're talking well over 5 years, so. I think I would, instead of trying to find stores that find them, try to find resources. Maybe Console Mods Wiki has it, I don't know, but try to find resources that list alternative parts that you could cannibalize from other stuff. Because yes, I hate destroying electronics, but if there's a Sony Discman or an old Sony CD player that doesn't really need any, you don't really use it, it's probably half dying anyway, but the switch is perfect on it. I think that's a really good use for something like that. So that's that's kind of where I would aim in your direction. But if anybody out there has any info, please just chime in the comments if you don't mind. Maybe point Adam in the right direction. But I'm pretty sure, I mean, because they're not going to custom make every part for the Sega CD. That would just raise the price to insane levels. So being able to just take parts they have off the shelf that they use in 50 different models of CD players makes the most sense. So there's has to be the same part out there, just in something else. So maybe there's an old Sony CD player or something that you'd be able to use, that, or a Sony computer drive or something like that that might have it. But if anybody out there has that info, please consider sharing. Next up, my friend Bernie, aka BFB, said they enjoyed my video on using the TINK 5X and 4K for 480i video capture. Thank you very much. I asked if anyone has gotten the Magewell USB Gen 2 to work for lossless RGB capture, and as long as you enable the RGB24 or RGB32 in the advanced tab of the Magewell USB capture utility, which is disabled by default, then the Gen 2 works perfectly for lossless RGB capture in OBS with UT Video. They couldn't tell me why it doesn't work in Virtual Dub or Amarek. Best guess it has something to do with the Magewell registering as a USB camera and some FFmpeg tomfoolery. Excellent suggestion. And I might still be able to get it to work in VDub, but I think I might have to do something like enable RGB 24 and 32, reboot, then load VDub or something like that. And just for anybody listening, there really aren't many reasons that you would need to record in 1080p lossless video unless you're doing things like video analysis, or if you really just want to make the best looking video possible. But even if that was your goal, in almost all cases, it's still going to get heavily compressed on video sharing services. So it's almost always a moot point. When it's not is when you're doing things like taking raw capture, blowing it up 10, 100 times, whatever, and using it to do video analysis, whether it's for your own product's development or if you're a reviewer or something like that. Because after it's been zoomed in, then if compression is applied by YouTube, it's way less damaging than having multiple compression added. Kind of like even when I talked about in the TINK video, recording the 480i lossless, scaling it, and then compressing it is it kind of like what the TINK does internally as well, is going to have much better results than recording in compressed 480i and then scaling that. Bernie said, keep up the good work and good luck with the TVC resellers. I'm sure everyone is staying perfectly reasonable and polite. Yeah, people are losing their minds over those TINK videos, and there's a lot of really pissed off people, but I'm trying to put this in a nice way. I guess when stuff like this, when you talk to groups of people who are experts in their field, a couple of things very often happen. First, you get the actualies, which, I make jokes about that, but I rely on experts like that all day long, every day. And I consider many people like that my friends, who I love and appreciate. But very often, they lose context. When you take a VHS or beta or any magnetic tape media and you run it through the TINKs using the settings that I showed, your audio and video stay in sync and you don't get that time-based correction wobble that you would get without it. I am 100% positive a $20,000 broadcast TVC is going to do a lot more. It's going to stop wobble on the vertical and horizontal. It's going to keep things even more perfectly in line. But is it something you would notice transferring home videos? And once you get to that level, if it really is that crucial, wouldn't you just be using Doomsday anyway at that point so that you could get the best possible original transfer? So it's one of those things where I understand and I appreciate people who get passionate about this stuff. But, it's just when people are like, oh, Bob's lying to sell retro tanks, it's not a real time-based corrector. Okay, then get any VHS player, plug it into a tank, and play a beat-up old tape for 2 hours and check the recording at the beginning and the end. Then get any device off of Amazon or any just basic capture card and do the same thing and see what happens. Period. End of story. It stays in sync with the retro tank. And I think while those types of people who get a little aggressive and drama-y about this annoy me, I don't think they realize that it's actually helping me, because when people get all super drama about this stuff and, make videos accusing me of lying, it just happened since the dawn of RetroRGB, by the way. You know how many people accuse me of being like a lag apologist or something? I don't know. But it just, they think that they're like, yeah, I got Bob, I showed him. But Anybody that hasn't seen the videos already are going to look at that and go, yeah, that's not true. Or people who have seen my videos and go, oh man, I've been watching Bob for a while. I hope he's not full of shit. I've taken his advice before. Go watch one of these videos and go back and go, no. That's not at all what was shown in the video. And this was already proved. So, for all of the people who are just viciously upset about me calling the Tinks a time-based corrector, keep it up. Thank you for sending more people my way to view my videos. Thank you for, without a doubt, proving me right again and again. And once again, if you're that person, you might very well be correct, but take it in the context in which I'm presenting it. I never said rip the $20,000 TBC out of your broadcast studio and put a retro tink in. I just said if you're going to try to transfer your tapes, there's a lot of crap methods out there. And I'm finally finishing up that other video, actually just waiting on the dev who's working with me to finish one final feature. And that's going to really demonstrate without a doubt what is the correct and incorrect way to do these things within reason. Under $1,000, usually less than half of that, usually under $500, which, it's a lot of money, but not if you take into context what's really needed to use this. And especially not if you take into context what a lot of these people say you're supposed to use, devices that were thousands and thousands of dollars new. Yeah, so maybe I'll release that video just privately to supporters, knowing that the software isn't ready yet. If anybody's still listening to me ramble, what do you think about that? If I release a video that's talking about a new piece of software that might not be finished till the end of the year, is that going to mostly just confuse people? Are they going to watch the video and go, all right, awesome, this is exactly what I need, and go to the website and the software doesn't match, it's the wrong version and it doesn't have the features? Is it going to mostly cause problems, or would my fellow nerds really get like, okay, this is an upcoming thing, it's not out yet, we're not going to share the video until the software is released? Let me know, if you're still listening to me ramble, what your opinion is on that. Because, or if there's any real hardcore capture nerds, just, message me and I could send you the video, knowing that don't share it because the software is not done. Maybe that's better. If they're, wherever you support, message me and let me know, and I could just give you a prep of what's to come. But I'm very proud of the video. I'm also really proud of the software that a buddy of mine made. And I think it really is going to clarify a lot of why I talk about using the retro tinks for VHS. I hope it will. I really hope it puts things into more perspective, because I've never once said this is the greatest VHS transfer ever. I just said it solves a lot of problems for people. So thanks for setting me off on there, Bernie. I'm sure you did that on purpose. Next up, Quantum Guitar said they just ordered my recommended Rigel scope now that they've gotten their Gateway oscilloscope experience over with, using that mini $35 scope from last week. And now they're looking at the RGBench and was wondering if something like this would be useful for calibrating consoles prior to test pattern usage for calibrating and white balancing a PVM. So I'm going to continue reading your question, but let me just pause real quick and talk about the RGBench. This is just a device that allows you to plug a SCART cable directly into it, and you don't need it. You could use probes. You don't need to spend extra money, but I love it. And I personally, for what I do, feel like it's worth every penny. And I would happily continue to buy them. Like if I accidentally dropped it and it broke, I would immediately jump online and buy another one without hesitation, because of ease of use. And it's not just that you're able to plug a SCART cable in without adapters, but the 75 ohm termination switches on there have been amazing. So what I end up usually doing is using the RGBench's termination, so there's nothing else that I need to worry about. Everything is properly terminated, going right into the scope. And depending on my setup, I might take the SCART cable and plug it into a PVM to get to the test pattern, and then unplug it and plug it into the scope. Or I might have T adapters. And either way, when the time comes to do the measurement, these days I've been unplugging whatever I use as the display and only using the RGBench for termination and for signal conversions. No, connector conversion, not signal, sorry. So SCART to BNC type of thing. So you do not need it at all, but it's going to save you a lot of time, and it's a really handy tool. So if you've already dropped some money, sunk cost syndrome, sorry, Quantum Guitar, you might want to just keep spending money. I hate telling people that, but this is just a rabbit hole where you're going to keep buying stuff. But it's just like when you buy a big toolbox and a tool set from Home Depot or something, and you get all these empty drawers, and eventually it's like, yeah, you know what? I could use a different kind of saw, and I could use a whole other wrench set. And hey, you know what? I'll put a chainsaw in there. Like, it ends up you use them all. You might not need them all, but you use them. But to continue your question, do consoles like SNES, N64, PS2, etc. offer any ability to fine-tune the video voltages being output from the amplifier? No, however, if you're using something like SNES or N64 with RGB mods, if you really wanted to go nuts with this, if this is something that's super important to you, you could replace the surface mount resistors on those mods and get the levels exactly at 704 or whatever you want them at for each console. Or, I mean, you could probably try to do that on the original motherboards themselves. I mean, now we're really splitting hairs, especially if you're using a TINK 4K, which could automatically compensate for all of this. I guess the only thing that I would say is if you plug in any of these consoles, which I've personally seen before in one chip SNESs and a couple of other randoms, but if you plug in a console and it's at like 800 millivolts, yeah, you know what? Maybe take the time to go in, figure out which are the resistors that could drop the voltage down and drop it closer to 700-ish, give or take a little bit. But if it's at like 740 or, 640, I think you should just leave it alone and just kind of not really worry about it. Now, if you're doing things like building devices where you need a perfect source to test from, that's one thing. But if you're really just being a perfectionist, I would care more if it was really low or really high. And then, yes, I would probably go in and try to tweak it one way or the other. But if you're just talking about, 714 would probably be best, but it's at 720 or 690, I would always leave that alone. But yes, you're right. It would be nice to calibrate your source for white balancing as well as other stuff. But if it's really far off, that would be the only time I would ever look into it. Continuing, right now, Steve from RetroTech, on the PVM 1953 that Steve from RetroTech serviced, they're dealing with some kind of gnarly ghosting from RGB sources. And it drove them crazy thinking the ghosting fix didn't work on their SNES Junior until they noticed it on the modded N64 too, which is only visible on component video sources if they crank up the brightness. So what cable are you using and what mods did you put in it? So this is one of those things where if you bought a mod from, that was designed by Bordy, or you bought it from Voltar and you're using the cables that are all linked and tested on RetroRGB, any of the main cable sellers, you should never run into that stuff. But if you're using some junky eBay board or some crappy AliExpress cable, then the ghosting could actually be the capacitors in the cable, or you could have gotten a bad cable from a vendor. It's not common. It does happen though. I mean, you can't make tens of thousands of cables and get every single one of them flawless in every way, or it could have worn down over time or something. So when you're troubleshooting this, are you using the same cable for this? And what mods are you using? So you're probably going to need to do a couple of more things to just verify and triple check that it's not your source causing it. They're planning to redo the G2 adjustments with this new scope, so you could mitigate some of these issues, but they're hoping to get the monitor processing sources more uniformly aligned, as well as making sure they're sending things as much to spec as possible. Yeah, I mean, I would just double and triple check everything about your source, the cables, the mods, the consoles. If there's another complete different set you could use to verify and kind of go from there, and then just kind of see where you're at. Also, don't forget CRTs are never going to be as accurate as like an OLED, for example, when it comes to perfection in geometry. So you could potentially have some kind of slight ghosting if you're looking really up close. But if you're playing at a normal distance and it's bad, then that's an issue. And that's kind of, it sounds like what you're describing here. Lastly, any recommendations for other uses for an oscilloscope, like adjusting voltages in tube amps? There's an infinite amount of things you could do. I primarily tested video voltage and sync voltage, as well as audio voltages, and occasionally I still use it for testing latency, although there's other devices like the Mr. Latency Tester, which are just easier to use. But this is one of those things where, just like your tools in your toolbox, you're going to have to wait to see what opportunities arise. You walk out in your backyard one day and a branch is half fallen down and it's at arm height. It's like, oh, I have a chainsaw now. Cool. Now I know another reason I could use it. And it's going to be the same thing. You're CD laser is going to die in one of your consoles at some point, and you're going to put a new one in, and then you're going to watch a video on how to use an oscilloscope to adjust the laser on, whatever console you're talking about, and you're going to run into stuff like that where things come up where you're going to end up using it. But yeah, so it sounds like you're really going down the right path, getting the correct tools and really learning how to get into this stuff. I would just double check the little things as well, because it's also really easy to get sucked into expert level stuff and find out that you grabbed the wrong cable. And I'm saying that not because I'm mocking you, because I'm mocking me, because I've done that quite a lot of times. So I just wanted to make sure to bring that up to try to hopefully save you some trouble. Well, that's it for this week. Sorry for missing last week, but family stuff has still been a little bit weird, and it's probably going to be to the end of the year, and then hopefully everything will get back to normal where I could start doubling down and hitting it hard like I almost always did for the previous decade. But I might have to miss some more Q&As, and if that's the case, I'm always going to just scroll through real quick. And it's one of those things where if there aren't too many questions one week, if there's anything that's time sensitive, like if somebody messages me like, hey, I'm about to buy this thing, what do you think? Like, I'll DM you or message you directly or something like that. But if there isn't anything like that, then I might just skip a week just to give me more time to write posts and make sure I'm not missing anything time sensitive. Because that's the thing is, there's so many cool things I've missed talking about on the weekly roundup and missed promoting. And I feel really bad about that. But the stuff that I don't ever want to do is miss things with a deadline so people miss out. So if there's an awesome new video or a new thing that's out, but you could totally get it, it's not back ordered, everything is still in stock, I feel bad, but at least we could get to it. But I don't ever want to miss stuff that there's a limited stock and a limited time to get it. And those are the things that I've really been focusing on. So, if I missed a firmware update or two, I'm trying my best to get back to it. But, it's hard juggling absolutely everything. I try my best to get to all of it. And I'm not the best at it, but I'm trying my best. So I guess that's all I can promise. But thanks for everybody sticking with me. I really appreciate it. I'm still hitting it hard behind the scenes as much as I can too. So there's a lot going on that, it's stuff that I can and can't talk about. I don't want to out people's new products or anything like that. But there's still a whole lot going on. It's just not as much as I could normally talk about. And, I don't, meaning the posts and everything else. So I don't know. It was a long-winded apology. I take all this stuff very seriously, and I appreciate you all very much. So thanks for sticking with me, and hopefully I'll be back pumping out post after post and being on time with these Q&As by the end of the year. So thanks very much. And at the very least, I'll see you at the weekly roundup next week.